waiting, everyone. So we're going to actually record this for boarding parents and upload it to the website so they can, parents, this happens to the headmaster all the time, so that they can see what's going on this evening. Welcome everyone. For those that don't know me, my name's Jonathan Burr. I'm one of the assistant heads of senior school, and I look after the Year 9s as they look forward to joining the senior school in 2020. Just conscious of the feedback there. I won't keep you long because Chris Hassel from World Challenge is here to talk to you about the overseas trips in particular tonight. But I've got some information for you that you might find useful. Rockhampton Grammar is a round square school, and most people in the senior school know about this, but not many in the middle school. Round Square is an international association of schools. There's about 250 worldwide, and they're founded on 6 pillars of, as you can see up there, and clearly with the outdoor education program that we run here in Year 10, like I said, this happens to the headmaster all the time. You can see a lot of parallels there, and I suppose the round square banner over arches all of the things that we do here at the Rockhampton Grammar School. Some specifics for you with the trips. We have a number of different choices for various family budgets, and they range from a couple of $100 with Great Keppel Island, Noosa River, Carnarvon Gorge, then the Whitsundays, sailing tall ships in the Whitsundays, and then the overseas trips of New Zealand, Vietnam and China. They're all on offer for 2020, and depending on how many students choose to take up which trip will depend on whether they run or not. For example, we offered China last year as well, but we ended up sending 2 groups to Vietnam because everyone was very keen on going to Vietnam. They all have a service base to these trips, or adventure base, but for example, going to New Zealand, it's going also to a underprivileged school and working at the underprivileged school for the school and often with the students. Vietnam, for example, students spend a lot of time here at the school raising money to take with them to Vietnam and pay for supplies and tradesmen, and they also do the work to either build, last year it was building a kitchen in a village, this year I think it was a toilet block to improve hygiene in a village, and that's the service element of that trip, for example. The really expensive ones are the overseas trips, of course, and that's not necessarily everybody's budget, but what has happened in the past is that students have gone out and got themselves a part-time job and earned $5,000 between now and next September, and have contributed significantly so that they can go on that trip. If they're desperate to go on one of those really big trips, life-changing trips, and Chris will talk more about those in a minute, you can do that. All students are expected to go on one of the outdoor education experiences next September. There are no Year 10 classes here at the school that week. All students in the whole cohort get involved in one of those programs. It has been running the last week of the term 2, the last week of June, or leading into June holidays, but we changed it next year to September on the premise that it's much better weather and also gives families much more time to plan for what's going to be happening next year. You have had forms emailed to you. There hopefully are some spares left.
Yep.
If you want a hard copy, some people have picked those up. And you need to rank your choices on the form so that you can return them to the senior school office by next Wednesday. With boarding parents, just get, spelling mistake there, I apologise, Mr. Bradfield, Mr. Norford or Miss Mangan to sign the form for boarders, and then parents can just email me with their permission for their child to make those choices, rather than have forms travel all the way home and all the way back again. So that makes it easier for boarders as well. We really do like to have a family discussion so that everyone's on the same page with what your choices might be for next year. Normally, every child will get their first choice, or in some instances, their second choice. So if you get your forms in quickly, certainly, as Mr. Boykos always says, first in, best dressed. And we can also, if you want to ask some more questions over the next day or so, certainly contact me and I can help you out with that. From World Challenge, Chris doesn't, as he said to the students last week, he doesn't normally come up and do this anymore, but he likes coming to this school to present. So please welcome Chris.
Firstly, yeah, thanks for turning up on what I know is a pupil-free day today. So all the students who came into school on your day off, huge congrats, well done. I know how hard that might be for some of you. But I can assure you guys, the information you're going to get today is going to be worth it. So obviously, I love travel. I'm always really excited to give these presentations, particularly up here in Rockhampton, because it does, I guess, take me back to the first time I ever left Australia, left the shores of Australia. And just for my interest's sake, I just want to get a bit of an idea of who's actually been travelling overseas before. So if you put your hands up. Okay, quite a few, that's great. I think times have changed a lot from when I went to school, and probably from when a lot of the parents in the room went to school as well. And could you hazard a bit of a guess at maybe how many hands would have gone up when I was there sort of 20 years ago? What do you reckon? Maybe half? Yeah, probably not even. Maybe 10%, maybe 15%. So we know that the world's far more accessible these days. And we know there's a whole lot of options. You've got some great options domestically here in Australia, which is great to see. And we know that throughout your life there's going to be a whole lot of options for you to go and travel the world. So I guess tonight's about why with World Challenge and why on these trips in particular. And part of that is, I think, anytime you go overseas, there's so much to be gained about experiencing other cultures, different landscapes, different foods for any foodies who are out there. Okay, particularly places like Vietnam and China, where the food's going to be really different. But for me, and I think for a lot of people in the room as well, and what sort of builds that curiosity is that it's the interactions that you have with those people overseas. It's those conversations that you're able to have to learn about what life's like for someone who's born in rural Vietnam or rural China, or someone who grows up in New Zealand. So that's the exciting bit. And secondly, I think it's great to be curious, and we know you're all curious, that's why you turned up here tonight. And I think some people are happy being satisfied or having their curiosity satisfied from other people telling stories, and that's great and that's fine. But I think what we've got in the room here tonight is some explorers. And the difference between the two is an explorer will actually go out with that curiosity and find the answers themselves. And I think that's what these opportunities are about tonight. For you guys to go out there, learn through doing, have that experiential learning adventure. And you're doing it with a company who's done this a lot. So we've actually been running these trips for, as you can see behind me, for over 30 years now. And we take students away from 20 countries across the globe, so we're a global organisation. And I think it's those facts that let parents sort of rest at ease when their loved ones go away for a couple of weeks or for 10 days into New Zealand, knowing that a company with this level of experience is the one who's keeping your loved ones safe. So that's a really important thing as well. So that's what we're hoping to get out of it tonight, guys. The next sort of 15-20 minutes will be about the 3 different destinations we have on offer. So we've heard Vietnam for 2 weeks, China for 2 weeks, and also off to New Zealand for 10 days away from home as well. So first, has anyone actually been to Vietnam before? Some of us, yeah, great. Some of us may have some other siblings or older brothers or sisters who might have travelled before. I know we took away just under 40 students last year to Vietnam from Rockhampton Grammar. So it was great to see. And then we had another 35 that went off to New Zealand as well. So I guess we know the taste for travel's out there. Vietnam is just an absolutely awe-inspiring destination. The people are super friendly. The food's obviously pretty out there in a lot of cases, tasty. A couple of fun facts for those who didn't know. So Vietnam has a population of just over 90 million, but 37 million motorbikes. Okay, so one of the things we work on with the group is how to cross busy streets. Okay, and there's a very simple method for that, and it's sort of start walking slowly with your group leader, and they'll see you and they go around you, and it's just the way things are done in Vietnam, in Southeast Asia. 40% of the population share the same surname, Nguyen, so that's a pretty interesting fact there as well. And the currency is called the Vietnamese dong. Okay, so when you go over there, you'll become instant millionaires with the dong there. So just a couple of little fun facts for you about Vietnam. But I guess what will happen when you all take off next September is we'll prepare you. You know, we spend the next 12 months getting the students ready. World Challenge plays a big part in that. We've got an online portal that the school has access to, that the students have access to, that parents have access to as well. And all the information about that is online, available 24/7. We've also got a customer support team that you guys can call as well. Okay, so that's all part of that preparation phase, as well as having the leaders who travel the team come up here and actually meet the students. And they'll do a training day as part of that. They'll talk about in-country scenarios. So really making sure we've got a nice, robust preparatory phase happening, just to make sure that when you do get to the airport, you're ready to go. Having said all that, when you touch down in Hanoi, okay, when you're in Vietnam, nothing will, I guess, prepare you for that feeling of getting out there and travel, getting through the gates of the arrivals hall, and you'll see all the taxi drivers there as you come through the arrivals hall. There'll be 100 people there, and they'll all be yelling out if you need a taxi, and they'll all be pretending to be your best mate. You won't know any of them, although they'll pretend that they know you. So it's that hecticness of Southeast Asia that I really love. You guys will head off and make your way to your first night's accommodation in Hanoi. And then part of that will be going out and having team meals, exploring the marketplaces, exploring the streets, really getting your travel on and having a lot of fun way doing that. Now, as Jonathan mentioned, with every program that goes out, there is a very big community element to that. So what we want to make sure is that when the students go out there, they're not just there as tourists, they're actually there engaging with the local people, learning from the local people. So before they even step foot into a community project, they'll actually sit and do what's called our AYANA workshop, which is a responsible travel workshop. So it's a 3-hour workshop run by local Vietnamese people, and it teaches the students who are over there how to travel through Vietnam responsibly and what types of things to expect when you're on your community project as well. Now, I can guarantee you guys, every student that travels to Southeast Asia does this with World Challenge, and he gets a 10 out of 10 feedback every single time. And where students rate themselves from what they know or what they think they know about community engagement before and after the workshops, goes up about 25% across the board. Okay, so there's some massive learning outcomes just from that, and it's really important that we do it at the start of the trip to prepare them for the next 2 weeks in country. Now, there's always going to be tasks involved. We're going to speak a little bit more about the responsible travel element of the community engagement a little bit later on, but just to give you a bit of an idea, I know we heard some examples there before. Okay, really important part of the program. Now, you'll be doing tasks because let's remember these communities who we're visiting, they're all growing. Okay, they've all got things that they're working on, and it's all driven by the community as well. And to just give you a very quick example, and I'll use one of a trip that I went on to Nepal. And I know we were there for 4 days. You'll actually be spending 4 days at your community in Vietnam. We were there for 4 days, and we were doing, I guess, what appeared to the students who were there as maybe a little bit of a mundane type task. Okay, they weren't sure what kind of effect exactly doing barrow loads and barrow loads of concrete was going to have for the community. They kind of started asking questions. I said, well, don't ask me, go and ask the community. Why are we laying these foundations for this toilet block? And so they went off and they found out, and they came back with these massive smiles on their faces. Oh, we get it now. We spoke to the community project host, and he said that this is the foundation for a new toilet block for the girls. Because currently at the school, there's no girls' toilets. Okay, now imagine that here in Rocky Grammar. Okay, be closed down. And he was saying, the community host was saying that it actually prevents girls from coming to school because they've got nowhere to use the toilet. So it's been a big issue that loads of boys are getting an education in this community, but very few of the girls were making the walk into school to get the education. And by doing this, it opened up access to all the girls in the surrounding areas. Okay, then we caught up with that community down the track, got feedback, and they quadrupled their numbers of girl participants at the school just from opening up that toilet block about 2 months down the track. So that just paints a bit of a picture of why these tasks are set by the community, because we didn't know that about the community, so it's not World Challenge's job to set those tasks. It's run by the people who live there. Okay? And it's always going to be something meaningful that you guys can get your hands dirty on as well. Not to mention just the community interactions that you have while you're there, those conversations, the playtime, all that kind of stuff. On top of that, you're going to be learning some local techniques and traditions. Okay? Another really fun part of travel, and the same again, things that you can't get from reading books, reading textbooks, things you can't learn from lessons inside classrooms in Australia. Okay, the best way to do it is actually go out there and learn from the locals and get them to show you. Now, with both our trips to both China and Vietnam, there's going to be a trek as part of that as well. Okay, it was a 2-day trek last year, and it's likely to be a 2-day trek on this trip as well. Okay, a very similar region. So you'll be trekking around Moi Chau. Okay, same again. It's about getting off grid, about getting the hiking boots on, getting the backpack on, and going out and experiencing some really beautiful remote parts of northern Vietnam. In and around the community where you'll be spending your time as well. So loads to learn, a lot of fun to be had on that trek. It is going to be a little bit challenging at times. Okay, so we do prepare you. We make sure we have a look at your fitness before you go away, and just make sure that you are going to be capable to be able to do this 2-day trek while you're there. And if not, we'll know well out, about 2 months out, so we'll be able to address that nice and early as well. There's also going to be some time for some R&R activities. Okay, so the UNESCO World Heritage listed Halong Bay, you guys can go and explore. We saw some photos of some yoga there as well. You guys can get involved in some yoga at Cat Ba Island. Obviously, the tailors are world famous over in Vietnam, particularly in Hoi An, but also up in Hanoi. Okay, you can get some suits made. We saw plenty of this from the teams returning this year. So actually, I think most of them were wearing them on the plane, so it's pretty cool. Very easy to spot as they made their way through Brisbane Airport. And then there's also other activities like cooking classes and water puppet shows and that kind of stuff as well. Okay, so it is a jam-packed itinerary. So you're doing something for every day for the 13 days. But it's loads of fun. You'll be going out, you'll be having team meals. There's a whole lot to learn in terms of the students kind of taking some ownership of that trip as well. So rather than a tour guide walking through with a flag and everyone just follow, it doesn't work like that with World Challenge. We actually give a lot more ownership back to the students. So everything's pre-booked and organised, but they'll be able to lead that in country when they're there. Okay. So moving on to the next destination, which is China. Okay, a couple of fun facts. Hands up who's been to China as well. A couple in the room, perfect, good. So you know it's pretty busy over there. It's also a massive country, so biggest in the world with just over 1.3 billion people. So this is a fact that I told the students last week at the assembly. So the giant panda lives in the mountains of central China and nowhere else on Earth, so that's pretty exciting. We also discovered that any panda alive in the world is actually owned by China. So if you do see a panda in a zoo, okay, you'll know it's actually owned by China and they're on lease. Okay. And if you put together all of China's railways, you could loop the Earth twice. Okay. You guys will be taking some rail travel while you're over there on the high speed stuff, not the old school slow train. So we'll talk to you about that. Same again, guys. Getting through the gates at Beijing Airport, it's going to be hectic. We'll get your transport out to your accommodation. First night, you'll be pretty exhausted by the flight getting over there, but then the next day it's about getting out there and exploring Beijing. World famous, obviously, for the Great Wall, so you guys can go and check that out. The food is a huge thing. Okay, I mentioned to the students that you've got to sort of be quite brave with a lot of the food that you're going to be delving into. Doesn't mean you have to eat everything, and if you have got dietary requirements, that's fine. Okay, we can sort that out as well. But I would say, put your brave hat on when you're going out for dinner in China, because there'll be some things that look pretty crazy, and in some cases I probably wouldn't even ask for you really. So yeah, you guys can go and check out the Forbidden City, obviously Tiananmen Square, okay, quite famous and for some very recent history as well, which you guys can explore. I did mention after your first few days exploring all those sites in and around Beijing, you'll be taking a train out to Xi'an. And then from there, you can go and check out the Terracotta Warriors as part of that. Same as with the Vietnam trip, so there is going to be a trekking option available, a couple of days again, all right? And very similar sort of terrains, very similar sort of, stress level to what the Vietnam one would be. Okay, so same again, we'll make sure you guys are prepped for this. But the landscapes are absolutely breathtaking, completely different, obviously, to what you're used to here in Australia. And same again, a great way just to get out there and see other parts of China that, if they're on a school tour or a family trip, you wouldn't normally get out to see these parts of it. So you'll be travelling with an expedition leader as well from Australia. So they're the skilled ones who are sort of keeping you guys safe, and they're the ones with all the know-how when you're off trekking these parts of both China and Vietnam. From there, you head down to Wollongong. Okay. Here's where we've got the Great Panda Research Centre, so you guys can get involved in this. Okay, so they go down there and learn all about the great pandas. Any of the animals that we see or that we have any sort of interactions with in country, okay, are never going to be part of sort of animals in captivity. It's all about rehabilitation, okay, and then getting them released out to the wild. So World Challenge has some pretty strong views on animal welfare. So there might be some things that you see in and around both itineraries that you would consider maybe going and visiting, and we're going to give you guys some education on why we do that as well, why we sign up to the World Animal Protection Organisation and that kind of stuff. So we do have these kind of elements to the trip, but it's never going to be based around animals in captivity or animals there for human entertainment. Okay, so pretty important that explain that. Same as with the Vietnam trip as well, so there is going to be 4 days spent with the local community as well. Okay, and all those learning outcomes are very similar, so it's going to be task-based. Same again, it's a growing community, it's a rural community. There's going to be a whole lot that you can learn from the local people there. Slightly bigger language barrier here, but we have got local speaking guides that travel around with both teams in Vietnam and China. Okay, so you've got the translators there to be able to help with those discussions, or just using really good body language and sign language is a great way to have a conversation with someone who doesn't speak English. You can learn a bit of Mandarin as well. So from there, guys, a couple of days that you've got in and around Chengdu to go and see the Sichuan Opera. It's part of that if you want. You can go and visit some of the other sites and temples. But yeah, that's the end of the 14 days, then you're heading back here to Australia. Okay, with a whole lot of experiences and one pretty incredible itinerary there through China. So same again, they're both jam-packed, guys, so you're travelling a fairly long way to get over there, so we want to try and squeeze in as much as possible on those itineraries. Third option, guys, is heading back over to New Zealand. So just to give you a little bit of information on this as well, so you will have seen obviously the Travel Bound Education logo down the bottom there. So I guess now's a good time to kind of explain the difference between the two. So World Challenge is I guess an expedition-based company. So we've been doing all of our trips to, I guess, these different parts of the world where there's quite remote trekking. We've got the, I guess, developing world communities and that kind of stuff as well. Travel Bound is our sister company, so based in the same office down in Melbourne as well. They run a lot of cultural tours as well, but they just haven't got the trekking side of things. Okay, so that's the main difference. And they also do a lot of trips and tours to, I guess, Western world places as well. So all through Europe, the United States, Great Britain, and they also go to New Zealand as well. Okay, so you'll see at the end of the night I'm going to talk about how to apply for the programs. So the China and the Vietnam trip is going to be run fully by World Challenge, and part of that is the payment plans as well. But the Travel Bound program will be, as you're used to doing, is going to be run through the school, okay, and obviously delivered by Travel Bound Education. When it comes to safety and backup though, okay, we've got the same operations centre that looks after both companies here. So really quick, into Auckland, okay. From there you can visit Mount Eden, okay, so the volcano summit. Pretty quick trip, sort of in the centre of Auckland, if you've ever been. And then you can head over to the Auckland Museum as well. Up there, now you have to excuse my pronunciation of a lot of these words, so Māori isn't my best language, but I'm going to have a crack. So the Rangitoto Island volcano, okay, on day 3. So anyone who's had a sibling that's travelled to New Zealand, so this itinerary is very, very similar to what the students did last year. There's a couple of little tweaks just in some of the activities that they'll be doing while they're there. Okay, you can explore the lava caves there and then back over to the mainland. From there, heading up to Rotorua. Okay, and up there you've got the gondola and the luge as well as part of that. Rotorua is supposed to be one of the most, from what I hear, supposed to be one of the most picturesque and I guess sort of awe-inspiring landscapes that you guys will witness in New Zealand. For me, I think New Zealand's just every angle you turn, there's a beautiful mountain or a massive crater or something amazing. But yeah, Rotorua really does take the cake in terms of that. So yeah, there is obviously an educational element to this trip. So you are going to be learning while you're over there as well as having lots of fun. So you've got the crater walk, which is a half-day walk. So I guess that's almost like the trek part of this trip. It is only a half-day walk for that one there. And some other really exciting things that you can do while you're up here. So you've got the zip lining, okay, and the eco tour. Get some really good feedback as well. You can actually you can do both of them as well as a Polynesian spa. Okay, so lots of fun to be had while you guys are learning. Don't worry about that. From there, heading up to Tongariro National Park. And then from there, yeah, you guys have got a guided walk along with a boat trip. Okay, so yeah, you've got an option to go and explore the falls. Okay, so you won't be swimming in these ones, obviously, for obvious reason. Okay, but yeah, some really picturesque things that you guys can capture as part of that boat trip as well. And then from there, heading up to the national park as well. So yeah, visiting the visitor centre and getting your introduction to the geography and geology. Of that area, so you can go up to the ski field as well. All right. I know the school had the option of doing a bit of tobogganing there last year. Okay, so that'll be on offer, and there's a couple of little sort of day hikes or half-day hikes that you can do in and around there as well. Okay, we did mention there is going to be a visit to a local school over there. Okay, so as with every program, I know the school's quite big on the service element to these trips, so there's going to be opportunity for you to go and visit and meet one of the schools there as well. It's in quite an impoverished part of New Zealand, okay, quite a rural, remote part. So yeah, it's not like you're just going into a high school in Auckland, so you'll get a good opportunity there to sort of see what life's like in rural and remote parts of New Zealand as well. And then day 9, heading back into Auckland before flying home. So, there's a lot of information in there, I know, guys, and I guess luckily we're recording this presentation tonight, so you guys will have access to that. Before we get into, I guess, the safety and the backup, I just want to touch on this really quickly because it is something that's a massive focus of World Challenge, and obviously Travel Bound being a sister company, a huge focus of them as well. And I think because the travel industry is such a growing industry, just a quick fun fact, it's actually grown from, in 1950, 25 million people travelling around the world, to, does anyone want to guess what it is in 2019? And take it 25 million out to 1.45 billion people, okay, every year heading away. Now because of that, there's quite a lot of scrutiny around how companies like World Challenge are engaging in that travel. Are they being responsible when they are visiting these communities? Okay, what kind of impact is happening when we're taking away those 8,000 students every year? Because that's quite a big impact. Okay? Now, it's not just the 8,000 students that are impacted, but you can imagine if those 8,000 students come back to Australia and tell 30 of their mates about their trip, or family members or whoever, okay, that reach now gets out to about 250,000. Okay, so it's a lot of people who, if we're not delivering these programs responsibly, that's a lot of people that are getting the wrong idea about travel. So we have a huge effort to make sure we're doing it right. So you can see some of the sustainable development goals that we work towards. So we don't obviously strive to work towards all of them because there's a lot of things that 15, 16-year-old students can't do as part of those sustainable development goals, but these are things that we've highlighted to say that we think they can. And we'll also put our hands up and say that we're growing in this space as well. Okay, so we're learning a lot about responsible travel and the nature, or I guess the data more so, about what it means to be a responsible traveller is changing, and we're changing with that. So I have mentioned things like having associations with the World Animal Protection Organisation. So we actually banned elephant riding with any World Challenge trip way back in 2016. Some of you would have heard that we started to develop exit strategies from orphanages. Okay, so World Challenge has a partnership with Rethink Orphanages where we don't actually work with any orphanages across the world now. And there's good reason for that, and a lot of the reasoning behind that is because the data was telling us that 80% of people who are in institutionalised care who are orphans actually have existing family, and they're there because of corruption and a whole lot of other things. So, you know, it has been a learning curve for us, and as we learn, we adapt and we change, and we've got some pretty big goals that we're working towards as well. Okay, so our UK office is actually 0% landfill, and Australia's making our way to get there as well. We haven't used plastic water bottles on any of our trips. Okay, so we use water purification systems. As you can imagine, 8,000 students using plastic water bottles over 14 days is a huge amount of plastic water bottles that end up in landfill. Okay. So these are all the things that we want you guys to know. We speak about them proudly, and they really do shape us as a company as well. So that's just to give you an idea. Last little bit, guys, so this is just about the safety that's going to be overlooking the students while they're away. So we'll have time for questions about this at the end, and then I'll run you through the application process.
A World Challenge trip is not like any other school trip. The nature of the trips are very different also because of the locations. So we're in the developing world. We could be in Malaysia, Mozambique, Myanmar, Mongolia or anywhere else. And we're in wilderness settings as well.
It's different to a normal school trip in the sense that we're going to some pretty exciting locations. Some of the activities that we're doing are different. They're adventurous activities, things that people might be doing for the first time. And you know, with that comes an element of challenge and something that people need to prepare for, really.
We do encourage students to do some preparation before they go away. In terms of the gear they buy, that's very important. In terms of the medical types of screening we need people to be honest about that and give us some really good information there. And then also physical fitness as well. So you don't need to be a marathon runner to take part in a World Challenge trip, but a moderate level of fitness is a really good idea.
Safety and support really is critical. Without a doubt, World Challenge sets the standard. And it's because of our 30 years of experience, 130,000 young people we've sent away, that we've managed to develop a really tried and tested state-of-the-art safety network.
For a start, you have a very experienced World Challenge leader with you, and we had a fantastic leader. And then he also then has the backup of the ops room.
It's manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year.
Travel in the developing world is different. You know, the roads aren't the same standards. Sometimes communication isn't as reliable either. Some of the things that we do to mitigate against that are provide our teams with satellite phones, give them satellite distress beacons. We've worked with third-party providers to identify where the best medical facilities are as well, and you know, if something happened, how would we evacuate someone? We've got that worked out too.
In hospitals throughout the world, they have something like 70,000 facilities on their list of approved providers. So they'll know the type of investigations and tests and treatment that will be available in all of those facilities, which is pretty formidable.
When I was introduced to World Challenge, to me, from all of the programs I've seen, and I've seen a lot, World Challenge is head and heels above the others.
We have teams departing from 22 different countries and travelling to over 40 destinations. So you might have a satellite phone, you might also have a tracking device. In fact, we have the ability to track teams live in the field.
Our global information system provides us with the ability to assess and call on up-to-date weather information, up-to-date security alerts, all this information at the touch of a button.
There's all sorts of things going on around the world. Even with the best plans in place, sometimes things have to change and we need to be flexible and dynamic. So I think anybody going on a World Challenge trip needs to go with that in their mind. World Challenge is there to support that change. We have the operations centre that's available and will help people come up with contingency plans.
Do everything we can to maintain their safety while they're overseas, and we take that responsibility very, very seriously.
So you can see, guys, there's a whole lot that goes into running the infrastructure, I guess, around the safety and backup, and a big part of that is incorporated in the cost of the program. So we can see the cost of Vietnam and China. I've just actually got these on two different pages, separate from the New Zealand one, because there's a little bit of difference around the inclusions, exclusions. So just to run you through all the inclusions for the Vietnam and China trip. So the idea is that students can go away on this trip and not take any money other than what they want to spend on souvenirs. Okay, so not going to be spending any money in the lead up. It includes the whole pre-departure program. Okay, it also includes that training day that will happen term 3 next year as well, okay, as part of that. All the accommodation, all the food, all the transport, obviously return flights, insurance while they're in country as well. Okay, so from when they leave Rockhampton Airport, they'll be insured the whole way immediately. But there are going to be a couple of additional costs that I'll talk about just quickly. So visas and vaccinations, the reason we keep these excluded is because they're all variables. So everyone's going to have different vaccinations that you've already received different passports will have different visa implications as well. But we can give you all the information about that, so it's all available on that portal where you'll have access to log in and actually find all these details. There's optional insurance around medical withdrawal. So what that is if you would like to insure yourself so that if you become unwell and can't travel, okay, we advise that you guys go out and get some additional insurance. So to cover cancellation costs and that kind of stuff. You will be insured entirely from when you leave Rockhampton. If you get sick the week before you go as part of our insurance with this, that won't actually cover you, so you can look into that as well. I did mention the spending money as well, and then obviously your personal kit. Now, because it hasn't got a massive, I guess, trekking sort of requirement, or you're not trekking for days and days on end, and you're not going to be requiring a whole lot of that kind of gear. So you can get away with both these trips with simple backpacks. Okay, even we had some students that did wheelie bags as well. That's totally fine. If you haven't got trekking boots, we don't expect you to go out and buy the latest and greatest trekking boots. You can just wear a nice stable shoe. That's totally fine as well. Okay, all the really sort of items that can add up in terms of things like down jackets for the cold and expensive sleeping bags. You guys won't need that as part of this trip as well. Okay, so we want to try and keep those gear costs down as much as possible. But yeah, so that's everything there. Is there any questions about the inclusions or exclusions for the World Challenge trips at this stage? We've got time for questions at the end as well. Sorry, the fonts are a little bit mixed up because we're using the school computer, so there might be a couple of words that were more funny. So the New Zealand one, it is similar, okay? The one thing you won't have as part of the New Zealand program is that portal that I keep referring to. Okay, so the World Challenge portal is access for only for students and parents and teachers travelling on the Vietnam and the China trips. Okay, there still is a support that you can call, a support number that you can call as part of that. Okay, so you can call through to these guys. With the payments as part of this as well, rather than going direct to World Challenge, these ones are going to be collected by the school. We can show you about those payment plans for that as well. The payment plans are very similarly structured, or structured the same as they are for all 3 trips. The World Challenge ones come direct into us because we've got the capabilities to be able to handle those payments, but the travel bound ones will go to the school as part of that. So a couple of exclusions again, so spending money, we can see there. Additional excursions not outlined, so anything I spoke about tonight, in terms of like the zip lining, the luge, the bobbiting, that kind of stuff, is all going to be covered. All their meals are covered as part of that as well. We do give them water in the as part of their meals, but if they want to buy soft drinks and that kind of stuff, then that will come out of their own personal spending money. Transport to and from, so that's Rock Outfield Airport essentially, so as long as you can get yourself down to the airport, that's fine. And visas, which you shouldn't need unless you're on a passport that's not Australian or New Zealand, so we can help you look into that as well. Okay, so one more thing I will mention, because I know Jonathan speaks about this every time we come and launch these programs, and I really like that he encourages all the students to actually play a part in paying for the cost of this program themselves. And I just want to give you a very quick example, and the reason I'm quite passionate about it as well is I've seen the result, and I've seen what happens when young people do make the effort to get a part-time job or do different small business plans. And I can see some parents starting to tap their students on the shoulder now and say, watch this bit, it's important, okay? Because it is important, all right? So part-time job is number one. If you get a part-time job and you can fit it into your academic schedule, brilliant. Okay, there's a reason why we're sat 12 months out. So last year we had a much shorter lead-in. It was closer to sort of 7 months. This year we're more than 12 months out from departure. Okay, and if you break down, we've got 52 weeks. If you break down a program like Vietnam, it's going to cost around about the $5,000 by the time you pay for your visas and your passports and a bit of gear and that kind of stuff. Okay, you're looking at about $100 a week. So if you can do a shift at McDonald's or KFC or Kmart or whatever it might be, and you can do that 4 to 5 hour shift once a week, and you can put away that $40 or $50 that you get from that shift, brilliant, you're halfway there. Okay, just from doing that. So it does make a big difference. One more demo I want to give you. Now this one is current in Brisbane. So I used to travel around to schools a lot and facilitate these programs. I don't do so much of that anymore, but I used to hear some really amazing ideas that would pop up. And one of my favourites was one I heard just at the start of this year actually. It was a student from a school down in Brisbane. Brisbane's got a pretty big cycling community, and there's a very sort of popular cycle route around the Brisbane River called the River Loop. The student thought it'd be a great idea to borrow a bit of money from mum and dad, borrowed quite a lot of money, and actually laid out $2,500 on inner tubes, bike tubes. Okay, so we got them at wholesale, $5 each. He then went down to the River Loop to a different cafe every Saturday morning, spoke to all the cyclists, said, hey, I'm doing World Challenge. If you buy this tube off me for $10, I make some money from it and it goes towards my trip. He sold them within 6 months, so he made $2.5 grand in 6 months. So then he bought another 500 and did it again. Okay, so he paid for nearly his entire trip just from doing that. He came back from expedition, came back from his trip and was making so much money doing it that he does it every weekend still. Okay, so it's little ideas like that where we know everyone's got different scenarios. Some of you have been planning for a trip like this for a long time. Others have just heard about it and now have to start to think of ways that you can get yourself onto that. And I will ask the parents to encourage your sons and daughters to get involved in that as much as possible. Okay, because it really has got some great learning outcomes and you're going to appreciate the trip a whole lot more if you've gone off your backsides and done something to sort of get yourself on there as well. So that's a quick example. So from here, there is a bit of an application process, and it's a little bit different to the way we do it typically at World Challenge, but I will talk you through it. Number one, for anyone who came along tonight, which is everyone in the room, some of you had the option of signing in with the QR code. Okay, so if you haven't already, you can either sign in at the sign-in sheet, old school way, or just hover your phone camera over that QR code. It'll take you to a link. You fill in the details, just make sure you hit submit, and that just tells us everyone who turned up here tonight. That's step number 1, if you haven't done that. Step number 2, the school's going to get you to submit this form with your preferences laid out, options 1 to 7. Okay, so I think these went out yesterday or today. These are due in by the 4th. Okay, Wednesday the 4th, your preferences are due in, and then the school's going to come back to you relatively quickly with a response to say whether you got whichever preference you got. And then there's a deposit for the 3 trips, okay, for our 3 trips in particular. So for the 2 World Challenge trips, you can do it very, very simply, guys, by following this form here. So if you haven't got one of these forms, grab one. It's got a booking code, you do it all online, you set up your direct debit, so you can either do it monthly payments, so you pay $4.90 deposit, which gets your spot on the team. Okay, it says that you're keen, you're ready to go. Then you do the monthly payments. I think for Vietnam, monthly payments of $450, a little bit different for China. With the Travel Bound program, we're going to have all those payments go through to the school. So Vietnam, China, just follow these booking codes, really, really basic. Make sure you get the Vietnam one for Vietnam, the China one for China. And then that's once you've got confirmation from the school to say that you're on that team. With the Travel Bound one, it'll just be the same process, but it'll go through to the school instead. Okay.
And just to clarify too, the domestic trips don't require anything other than the students selecting those trips, because come the end of September, October 2020, the school will put those charges for those domestic trips on your account.
Perfect. Okay guys, so last little video, then we're going to open up for questions. Thank you so much for coming along tonight. This last video, all it does is, I guess, highlight what I was talking about before, and it's the reactions of students when they come back from a trip overseas with us, and obviously the reaction of their parents as well. So it's a little feel-good film, and then I'll open up to questions at the end.
Before the trip, I think I was very comfortable and I was very happy living just like an easy life, and I'd never really thought beyond that. I think it makes you more grounded and it makes you more appreciative of what you have, and it makes you want to learn more about other people in other countries.
It's the kind of learning that I've never sort of had before. I've briefly touched upon it when I've been playing rugby, but actually being out there and learning on my feet is something that I couldn't have got while I was at school, and I've realised that I can do things myself and I can look back at what I've done myself and improve.
I talked to a friend who had gone to Ecuador, and I was kind of skeptical, and she pushed me to do it. I was like, well, isn't it just a lot of camping? And she said, no, like I learned so much, changed so much, experienced so much, and that was kind of what made me realize it was something I wanted to do. It's an adventure for sure, and it's a challenge. I mean, you're going to be able to meet people, and you're going to learn so much about yourself. You're going to see things that you never, ever thought you would.
Brilliant. One of the best experiences ever. Never been a part of anything quite like it. As a student, as a teacher, as an adult, it was just mind-blowing.
Don't think about any of the negatives that could possibly happen. Just go for it, because honestly there aren't any. There really aren't.
What did you say you were going to do when she arrived?
Run at her and hug her and say she's a legend.
Just do it. It's amazing. I didn't know what I was going to expect, but it was just amazing. I just can't even actually describe it, to be honest.